Awesome. Hello, everyone. My name is Desiree. I am the director of the First Generation Success Center here on campus at UNT. And this is Beginner Guide to Graduate School with a special emphasis and focus on the first generation student experience with graduate school. Today, we have a panel of experts that are seasoned working with students who come from first generation backgrounds, and they will help us answer questions about graduate school and how to pursue different programs and funding with graduate school. So we'll go ahead and start with an introduction of all of our panelists, and then we will segue into a series of questions. And then if anyone joins us at the end and they have questions, we can answer and ask, have them ask and answer those questions as well. Okay, so panelists, are you all ready?
Ready.
Yes. Awesome. So we'll go ahead and get started. Allyson, if you would please introduce yourself, your role at UNT, and your departmental objective.
Awesome. So my name is Allyson Gardner. I am the Associate Director here at the Learning Center. And as far as our departmental objective, we are here to help you succeed. We are all about academic support, and our goal is to give you the tools for whatever your journey may look like. And I am here today because I also specifically work with our grad programs in our office that we provide to help prepare students for graduate school and things like the GRE exams. So that is what we do.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sean Guinyard, pronounced he, him. I serve as a graduate recruiter for all of UNT's 130 plus graduate programs that we have to offer here at the university. I also help out with the admissions process for anybody who's looking to do second bachelor's, certificate programs, pretty much you name it. So if anybody has any questions in regards to the application process, I work with a small team. It's really a team of 3 of us, one being a graduate assistant, my supervisor, Danny Mordecai, and myself. So definitely we get a lot of questions regarding what the application process is like for our graduate programs here. And I'm always willing to answer questions that you all have. So looking forward to it.
Awesome. Thank you, Sean.
Okay. My name is Kevin Caffrey. Teach in the Honors College, but I am an anthropologist by training, but in this position, I'm specializing in making it possible and likely for first generation low income and underrepresented students to get into doctoral programs, specifically PhDs in research. That's our target. We serve 34 students every year. We're funded to serve 34 students every year. Our program is funded by a big federal grant from the Department of Education. I'm the PI on that grant, and what we do is we spend money to remove the obstacles that most first generation and underrepresented peoples have when they go to apply to, prepare for, apply to, and start PhD programs. So yeah, that's what we do.
Awesome.
Anything else?
Nope, that was it. Thank you for the introductions. We'll go ahead and move forward with the list of questions. So number 1, how does or can your department support first generation students who want to pursue graduate studies? And of course, this is open to anyone. There's no particular order.
Well, okay. I'll jump in on that. Oh.
Okay. Allyson, you go.
Okay, sorry, I was gonna keep the tradition of going first. So, we provide in our office lots of different resources for being able to get into grad school. As I mentioned earlier, we do have a GRE prep course that helps students prepare for the GRE exam. We also have a workshop that goes over the process of applying to grad school in general and what that looks like. We talk a little bit too about UNT specifically in that process, but also the bigger picture for people who are maybe looking beyond UNT. And then as far as outside of that realm, sometimes I think people forget about the fact that the grad school process is much more than that last year and that application and that interview and whatever else may be part, that reference, whatever that part is. It really is a culmination of the entire, career in your undergrad. And so we're here to support that and make sure that you have the best application possible in terms of your grades, in terms of your classes, and in terms of the skills beyond that. So, if you're able to persist and get through some really difficult classes, that's a skill that you can turn into a great essay for a grad application. And we can help you with those kinds of things through the Learning Center. We have tutoring to help you with the content specific stuff. But then we also have academic coaching, which can help you with the, academic skills pieces. I really like to consider our office kind of an ally to first-gen students, in that we really focus on making sure that we employ a lot of first-gen students, because majority of the students who come to the Learning Center are first gen. About 60% come to academic coaching, or 60% of our academic coaching students, I should say. We'd love more first gen students to come, but that's the majority of the students who do come are first generation students, and they get a lot of benefit from meeting with other people who have dealt with some of the same things that they're dealing with, and working through that. So we really have stuff that's beyond just that grad school process that's going to help you for that grad school process. And then once you get there as well, give you those skills. So I would strongly recommend everybody come and see us, and we would love to work with you.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah. Specifically for first generation students, what we do is we support what Allyson just said. In many ways, we do similar things. Since our program is competitive and we're targeting people who specifically want to get the PhD, it's a little bit more supercharged and focused. Since the program is competitive, we do have a requirement that that students have a 3.0 GPA, which is the minimum for being competitive for funding in PhD programs. Because we want people to be able to not go into debt by going into grad school. That's a significant obstacle. And so while I'm talking about that obstacle, let me present how I think about first generation students who are preparing or thinking about going to graduate school anyway. With first generation students, the one thing that sets them apart most probably from their non-first generation colleagues is that they don't have a family background to draw upon of experience. Like, I'm a first generation, so I grew up on a farm in the middle of the Kansas prairie. And as far back as anybody knows, on either side of my family, nobody had ever gone to university. So I was relying on secondhand information from friends' families, which was already too many different translations for me to get a really good sense of what being a university student was like. And that was just being a college student. Being also the first person in my family ever to go to graduate school was magnified. So there were all sorts of obstacles that I didn't even know about. I didn't know how to write proper formal letters. I didn't know what I needed to sign, why I needed to sign it. I didn't know how attentive I needed to be to deadlines. And I had to acquire all that skill much faster than normal people. And this was, I went to university before they had the McNair program, before they had many of these programs. So I had to make this step up as I went along, and I learned by trial and error, mostly error. And what we do, what Allyson does, what Sean does, what I do, is what Desiree certainly does, because this is her ball game, is we try to make those obstacles less of a challenge. McNair in particular, we fund people to do certain things. We fund them so that they don't have to have a part-time job in order to make ends meet. That allows them to concentrate on their on their studies. Now, for first generation students, I recommend that you try your absolute best to not work too much part-time. Sometimes it's not possible. You got to have a job. You got to eat. I had the same problem. I had to have a job. I just didn't sleep very much. That's an understandable kind of situation. You sort of got to pay the tuition one way or another, right? Also, we do the one thing that makes people most likely to get funded in graduate school. And this may come as a surprise, but the one thing that sets first generation and underrepresented people apart from their fellows when it comes to applying to graduate school is whether or not they have mentored research experience as an undergraduate. So we will pay them to do that. We pay our scholars to do that because it serves two things. It takes away two obstacles. One, do you know methodological approaches to things? If you do, then you're golden. If you don't, then you're in trouble. Do you or do you not have a letter of recommendation from a faculty member? If you do, then you're golden. If you don't, then you're in trouble. These are full faculty members, mentors, right? So when we make it possible for them to do mentored research, it only helps them for getting funding in graduate school. If you're not in the McNair program, you can still take from this example that if at all possible, as an undergraduate, you should involve yourself in mentored research experiences of some kind, because that provides you with the single key thing that is going to get you accepted into graduate school. But anyway, that's a couple of the obstacles that we try our best to make sure people can have a shot at overcoming, and that we've identified as first generation students as facing. So,
Thank you.
Well, so as I mentioned earlier, I work in the graduate. I work as a graduate recruiter office. Work as a graduate recruiter in the admissions office. So I'm really here to help students in that sense. How do we do it as a department? I pretty much as our small team, honestly, now that I look back and reflect at it, I'm pretty sure both Dana and I are first generation college students. So we understand and we bring that sense to the application process when it comes to graduate admissions. Specifically, yes, at UNT, but when we are doing events, because we speak to thousands of students throughout the year, whether it's we go to their school, we do a virtual event with them. Each of these events are different. So I'm always catering to different kinds of students. So I interact with first generation students quite frequently. And my personal niche and the reason I went to grad school was to be a helping hand to first generation students who, as myself, who had that experience, and make sure that they have a seamless and fun experience while they're in college. So I personally, on my behalf, if Dana is not directly advising me to like, hey, you should check out this McNair event that's going on this week, or you should check out, there's a research symposium with first generation grad students. If she's not already pointing that out to me, there's frequently times where I come across events and I mention it to her like, hey, I'm not asking, I'm just gonna go and do that because this is what I like to do. This is my niche within higher education. So how do we help as a department? We treat first gen students with pretty much, if not the same amount of service, more amount of service, because we understand everything that needs to be understood for the application process. There's often things that first generation students do not know about. For example, one of the things that we're going to discuss is the myth with funding opportunities. That's something that keeps students from, pursuing that graduate degree because they don't know that simple thing about all the funding opportunities that are out there for grad students. So yes, I'm a helping hand pretty much at the forefront of Dr. Caffrey and Allyson. I'm over here bragging about their programs all the time. I talk about their resources all the time. So just to be sitting here in a Zoom room with them, and it's like, wow, look, y'all are saying exactly the things that I go out and tell these students. There's a lot of resources that are out here once you get here and you've been admitted into the program. But before you can get through that process, let me help you out. Let me be that helping hand on the way to help you get it admitted into the university as a grad student.
Thank you. I will say this. So Dr. Caffrey, I'm a TRIO alum. And when I graduated with, and also first gen, and when I graduated with my undergrad, I didn't realize that students that were outside of business PhD or business law school or medical school could go to graduate school. I was really limited in my knowledge. And it was because of a McNair director that my eyes were even open, that students could go to other programs. And so you mentioned that, you know, there might be something that students who are non-McNair or non-McNair seeking could take away from this presentation. And as someone who has definitely benefited from a situation like that, I wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah.
So our next question is, what are the benefits of having a graduate degree?
Allyson, you're up.
We'll just go in order then.
I was going to let someone else jump on this one though. I feel like the part of this kind of depends, right? I would say that, in terms of having a undergraduate degree, what are the benefits? I think that the benefits do vary by what field you're going into. In some fields, you can't not go to graduate school, right? There's some fields you have to in order to do that profession. Whereas in others, you don't have to do that profession, but it does provide benefits like more money, a better chance of getting a job. Networking is huge in graduate school. One thing I'll also say that I don't think is talked about a lot is just the grit and the resilience and the persistence you learn in graduate school. My husband and I talk about this all the time, and having gone through the process, and just a lot of the times it just felt like you were learning how to jump through hoops and keep on going. and there is some power to that. That is the real world. When you are out there doing whatever it is you want to do, you have that doesn't stop, right? You have all these hoops you still have to jump through. And that persistence and that grit that you learn in graduate school is invaluable. So I do think that's one of the biggest benefits, no matter what you're going into, that you would get out of a graduate program that I think sometimes gets overlooked. And I'll let somebody else jump on and add more or correct me if I say anything crazy.
Well, that's great. I have an entire hour lecture that is directed at answering this simple question. But in short form, a very important, but probably to me, the least important benefit for going to grad school is quite simply, you make more money. Most of the time, not all of the time, but most of the time. But that, to me, that's the least important, because I'm a product of a liberal arts background. I think it's a very bad idea to be too professional focused in your education. Now, mostly people ignore me about this, but I think it's important that you look at the intangible benefits of getting a graduate degree. And to me, that's because it makes the world a bigger, more familiar place. More than anything else, it makes the world a bigger and more familiar place. The world doesn't look alien or as alien to you once you have expanded your vision a little bit. The people who once may have been unusual or odd or the other are no longer once you've expanded your vision a bit. Now, I'm not to put too fine a point on it, I'm half a generation from being a poor white redneck kid from Kansas. But that was an uncomfortable situation to be in. I didn't recognize anybody who didn't seem like me, didn't seem like they were the same kind of thing as me. But for 20 years, I went to universities and graduate schools, and I lived in China for 13 of those years. And the world is very familiar to me now. Things that I thought were alien are not alien. They're actually quite familiar. People that I would have never associated with are now my best friends. things in the world that would have struck me as positively frightening, now I consider to be utterly ordinary. And that's the best possible outcome that you can have from a graduate education. The money, I mean, I'm an academic, so I don't make any money, but you don't have to be an academic. You can go and make more money doing other things with a PhD. In fact, if you are at all concerned about money, and there's no reason you shouldn't be, getting a graduate degree is your best bet. It's just not the reason I did it. And it's probably not the reason a lot of people do it. So there you go.
Just to piggyback off that, yes, that's always a key selling point is, yes, you can go out and make more money if you have a graduate level degree. Honestly, if that's your only reason for going to grad school, you got a lot coming for you. I will say that because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of grit. That's for sure. So yes, it's easily a selling point, but I think it's not, from my perspective, it's not so much the money aspect. It comes down to, yes, you are going to get a more refined and more specialized degree within the field and career that you want to go into. But when you get into that field, you're not going to be like everybody else who has a bachelor's degree if you have a graduate level degree. A bachelor's degree nowadays is becoming more saturated. It's saturating society, and it's more common to just have a bachelor's degree in that field. Now, a lot of these corporations, a lot of these companies that we as individuals want to work for, they're asking for more, especially if you're looking into those mid-level and those entry-level leadership roles and those management level roles. You have to have at least a master's degree, if not a doctorate in that area. That's from my work standpoint. Me being who I am, I can definitely say simply having a graduate degree, from my experience, which was 3 years ago, I just finished grad school. And as soon as I finished grad school, before I even walked the stage, I pretty much had a job lined up just because of that. Because I not only I took the time to get here at UNT in 2016, establish myself in the admissions office, and honestly with an enrollment, because I stayed working a part-time job as a graduate assistant for enrollment while I was in school. So it gave me the opportunity to network. It gave them a chance to see how I work, because I was getting my degree in higher education. I wanted to work in a college environment. I was like, man, if I could stay here at UNT, I'm staying here at UNT. That was literally my goal. And I achieved it with very little attempt in applying for jobs, just because I had a master's degree. So I honestly am a walking example, and I will always use my story and what my experience was as a graduate student as an example, because when it comes down to landing that job, that's the easy part. But when it comes to that management level and getting those management level positions, that's where they want to see those pieces of paper, is with your degrees, with your certificates. That's why having a graduate degree is important.
Yeah.
Thank you. So our next question is, which majors are the best majors for students wanting to go to graduate school?
Sean, no.
No, seriously, I was gonna say, honestly, it's whatever you're passionate about when it comes to your career area. You can have a degree in whatever you want, but once you get into grad school and you start studying those things, whatever the degree is, you can kind of cater it to however you want, especially when it comes to that research piece. UNT being a tier 1 research institution is a good example of research opportunities when you get into the university perspective, especially at the grad school level. Because once you get in and you start focusing on those research opportunities, you can kind of tailor your research towards what you want your career to be in. You can, I got my bachelor's in kinesiology, but I have a master's in higher education. These are two totally different fields. I originally thought I was going to be a chiropractor making 6 figures going to pop backs. Mm-hmm. But in reality, my strength and what my skill was in, it was being a service to students. And that student experience is something that made a big impact on me. So I made a career change. I made a career shift. So that was my reason for going to grad school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, Sean. I wanted to throw it to you because I was like, I don't want to say something crazy, but you know, what you said is exactly what my gut instinct, right? Is what are you passionate about? Because I'm not aware. Are there any programs that would deny somebody because they don't have a particular major?
So they won't deny them. What will be asked is that they complete prerequisites within that field. A good example is our College of Engineering, our College of Business. You can't just jump into a master's of MBA or a master's of computer science. No, they're like, no, you need to have these specific classes completed before you even think about taking an entry-level graduate level course.
Yeah.
So they're gonna these programs, they're gonna make sure that the student is ready for that path, regardless of what it is. I came in with a heavy background in anatomy and physiology, biomechanics. I was doing a lot of sciencey stuff, but my master's education was definitely more of like a social science. It was a lot more papers. It was a lot more writing. Not saying that you're not going to do that on the science side as well. You're going to write about science stuff that goes way over my head at the master's level for sure. So, but yeah, they pretty much prepare you and get you ready for that. They'll make sure that you're ready each of these programs when you're applying.
The best majors for students wanting to go to graduate school. I don't know how to answer that question. I don't think that there are any bad majors. I think you do whatever you want to do. I mean, there are probably more positions in graduate school available to those fields that are thriving. That would be the obvious ones, like biology, psychology,
data analytics is something that's booming.
Yeah.
Computer science, you know, the ones that have the largest number of students. Business is always a big one. If we're including graduate professional schools, then business is probably one of the bigger ones. So I don't think there's a bad major. I mean, three or more years ago when I taught at Harvard, I taught students who were just dead set on going into the most underfunded, smallest, tiny little graduate programs in the world, like ancient philosophy, classics. You know, these are tiny little programs. They have them, but they're small. But they did fine going. People do fine going into graduate school in those programs. I don't think there's a bad major. It's just which ones are more competitive and so on.
I think it's more like a pick your poison. Which route do you want to take? Because either way, it's gonna be hard. This is going to be its own definition and designed a specific way of its difficulty. Grad school is honestly made to either make or break you with your academic experience. Most people, they're very prideful, especially when they get into these programs, that they're not going to quit easy. So they're going to do everything that they can to achieve that. The main thing is that you, regardless of what experience you choose, just take note of the skills that you gain throughout, because a lot of the skills that you gain, especially if you take on a graduate assistant role, especially if you're working full-time while getting a graduate degree, some way, shape, or form, it will overlap in various areas. So my recruitment experience, it doesn't only have to be used in admissions. Like if I really wanted to, like I could branch out and go search for recruitment jobs specifically. It's just, you got to take note of the skills that you're gaining as you're going through your experience. That's what will make the most out of, you know, what degree you choose and how that'll help you in the future with landing that job.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for that. I can definitely agree, Sean. My bachelor's degree is in secondary education in Spanish, and my master's degree is in public administration. So you don't necessarily have to align your undergraduate experience with your grad experience.
Yes.
So the next question, and probably the most commonly asked question, is, does financial aid change for graduate students? And if so, what are some ways to fund your graduate school experience?
Yes, it does change. So financial aid, when I hear that, I'm thinking federal level. Yes, it does change at the federal level. mainly because when you're a graduate student, that's considered an advanced degree. You're not going to be out here just getting grants offered to you left and right. Honestly, there's very seldom times where grad students receive grants. They definitely solely focus on that EFC, which is the estimated family contribution. So it really comes down to that. Usually when grad students are receiving funding at the federal level, it's usually through loans, which is what you often hear students don't want to do, is take out loans. But of course, it's there if you need it. So main loans that is offered is unsubsidized loans. So if it's a need, don't ever be too prideful to accept that money and take that loan, because I'll tell you, I gladly did, and it helped me finish my degree, helped finish a good portion of that. So with that being said, we often push students a lot towards scholarship opportunities. So there's other funding opportunities out there. Actually, let me share the link with Desiree so she can share with you all. But the funding opportunities that are out there is a lot. It's free money, it's scholarship opportunities. And that all comes down to when you submit your application, because usually when you're applying for graduate programs, you have to be accepted into a grad program before you start seeing the money side of things. And usually that comes with how you perform during your undergrad from freshman year to you graduated. That can make a big difference in what kind of funding opportunities are out there. The higher your GPA is, the more likely you're going to receive funding. Scholarship opportunities, graduate assistantships is something that we often push students towards. We have over 1,300 positions for graduate assistants, teaching assistants, research fellows, and research assistants as well. So let me pull that up really quick and I'll just shoot that in there. But there's a lot of funding opportunities, especially when it comes to free money. And then of course, like I said, if you needed to take out loans, you can easily take out an unsubsidized loan if need. So did you all have any that y'all want to add on that?
Yeah, I just echo that. I mean, the main thing I'm always telling students is a lot of undergrads are used to what you were talking about, which is the Pell grants, Sean, getting those federal Pell, and those are largely reserved for undergrads. So when you get to graduate school, the likelihood of getting a Pell grant is diminished. But I think sometimes people hear that as, oh, that means there's less money. But on the flip side, like you said, there are these research assistantships, teaching assistantships, graduate assistantships, which I would strongly encourage everyone to consider and look into, because not only do they provide money, and some of them vary in how they provide money, they may give you a stipend in addition to a tuition benefit, which is huge, or put you in-state tuition if you're going somewhere out of state. You know, there's a lot of benefits to these fellowships and assistantships. And additionally, it gets you really into the heart of what you're doing. You know, it's like the mentored research that Dr. Caffrey was speaking to. If you're doing the research assistantships at the grad level, it's like an internship on, you know, speed. And, you know, if you're looking at a teaching assistant or a fellowship or graduate assistantship. And a lot of times I hear from people who do those fields, it leads to a full-time position later on.
So it leads so fast. It's crazy. Like I walked in, like the main reason I applied for UNT was honestly because I knew they offered assistantships. And I knew they offered tuition benefit for being in assistantships. It was a requirement for the higher education program that I was in since I was a cohort member. Pretty much I had to have an assistantship on campus, and I had to have 2 different ones. So some of these programs are structured to where you have to have an assistantship, especially if you're looking into more detailed programs like cohorts, which is pretty much an opportunity where you take classes with the same group of students all the way through. It was 11 in my cohort. I call myself the 11th man because I was the last one in the cohort to apply. I pulled up to the orientation. Everybody was looking at me like, you wasn't in the interview process. You wasn't there with us. It's because I went through the whole application process after the deadline went through. And they just happened to have space in for more students. So I was like, they were like, yeah, you seem very passionate about this. Are you sure you only want to do the general track for higher education? I was like, no, I definitely want to do the cohort. So I secured a job and I secured an assistantship in undergraduate admissions. So that's where all this started. That's where I got all this experience. That's why I'm sitting here talking in this Zoom room today, because of assistantship opportunities, which led to a tuition benefit opportunity, which covered 2/3 of my program. Didn't have to pay for 2/3 of my master's program. Like that's a lot of money. So that's not including if you get scholarships, because if you get scholarships, you could pretty much go to school for free, like if you want it. So you timed it right. It's all about the timing of that submitting application.
Yeah, there's not much I would add to that. Allyson and Sean have talked a lot about the different possibilities. For my specific group of people who are being pushed towards or have a goal towards being a PhD holder, doctoral education in particular, most of the first generation students don't realize that there are two ways to do that. The one way, what used to be the normal way, is to first go and get a master's degree in a master's program. And then after you've completed the master's program, then apply to a PhD program. That used to be the ordinary, normal, default way to do that. The problem with that is that it's not the normal way anymore. And it's not the normal way because applying to a master's program has less funding available. Whereas applying directly to a PhD track has more funding available. So I encourage most of my scholars to apply directly to PhD programs. And most of those programs will give you a master's degree along the way. But you apply directly to a PhD program. Most of the funding available in such programs is tuition waivers, scholarships, fellowships, and some research assistantships, graduate assistantships, teaching assistantships, that kind of thing. But what a university has available in terms of funding is very specific to that university. Like a Research One university, for example, will have much more in the way of research opportunities, research assistantships available to it. Smaller schools won't. But everything will depend on the applicant having a pretty decent understanding of the funding landscape at that graduate institution. That's not that hard to acquire. It's just doing a little bit of research. It's just a daunting bit of research. It seems, if you're a first generation student, it seems like it's an alien kind of horrible obstacle to overcome. But most universities have people like Allyson or me or Sean who will help out if at all possible.
Definitely. I think the one thing that I would include with that is, so if you're a student and your personal situation doesn't allow for you to possibly go to graduate school full-time, you may also be able to receive funding through your employer. So sometimes your employer might be able to subsidize your graduate school experience. So for example, my employer was able to subsidize a large portion of my graduate school experience, which was UNT, coincidentally. And so 2/3 of my tuition was covered with that. And there are a lot of other larger corporations and even public entities that will do that as well. And it really helps. So if your situation doesn't allow for full-time, or you have to do full-time, but you're also full-time education, but you're also working somewhere else, check with your employer to see if they can possibly fund your experience.
That is also a good question. That's also a good question when students are applying for like full-time jobs after getting their bachelor's. If you know that you want to go into a full-time job right after graduating with your bachelor's and then come back later and go for your master's, definitely ask that when it comes to the benefit. They mention benefits. Okay, what do you mean benefits? You're ask them if they provide any kind of funding for furthering your education and furthering your experience, for sure.
Yeah, I guess as an example of that, Daisy Hems was our program assistant for a long time. She's left the program now, and she's got a position with Fidelity Investments. And one of the benefits for her in that position is that they'll pay for her to go and get a master's degree. So never turn down free money.
Never.
That's my best advice.
I think one example, I had a student who landed a position, and their employer was able to cover the cost of their graduate school education. But there was a contingency that they had to, after they received their master's degree, they had to continue at that location with that employer for a certain amount of years. And I think I'll never forget this. The student was super excited because they said, not only will I have my master's degrees covered, but I get job security after I get it. So that was their perspective, like, oh, 3 years, that means that I have job security for at least another 3 years. So anyway, that was just a really great experience that I had with the student. Okay, so just considering time, let's see. The next question is, when should students begin to consider graduate programs or graduate school in general?
Now, anytime. I mean, I think this goes both ways. It's never too early and it's never too late. Like, I don't want students to ever feel like, oh, I can't start thinking about it now, I'm about to graduate. It doesn't matter. When you feel like that's something you want to do, start exploring it then whenever that time comes. But I will say, like anything in life, if you have any inkling that this might be for you, I would start looking and exploring that path now, so you can really set yourself up for success, so that you can make the changes you need to now, to have the best possible chance of getting whatever, program it is that you want, and using the resources at UNT to make those changes to get into that program. There's a lot of great, anybody who feels like they may not be able to do it now because they don't have the right, major, which we talked about before, or they don't have the right GPA. There are resources here on this campus that can help you. Like, I know one specifically for med students, for students who want to go to med school, but they currently don't have the qualifications for that. There are programs through UNT that will help basically reset you and get you back on the med track. And it's made for first gen, low income students. So there are those things out there. You just don't know about them until you start pursuing and start asking. So I would just say that's the best advice I can say is, if there's any possibility, then just start looking now. Start your research now. Start asking questions. Get connected, reach out to any of us here. And I'm sorry I've volunteered everybody, but I mean, we want to support you and help you. So, there are things there for you to figure out what you want to do, but it's never too late and it's never too early.
What she said.
Thanks.
Ideally, if like, all right, I want to roll straight in after my bachelor's degree, like if you're one of those students, you definitely one of those frontline runners, that's for sure. I definitely call myself a frontline runner. I'm always willing to throw myself into some kind of work. But I feel like when I say this, I feel like a fictional movie character, like you'll know when you're ready for grad school. Like, no, like you will know when you are ready to, because there's a lot of things to take into consideration, which is, the geographical location of where you'll be studying and where the program's located at, whether it's online or not. Funding opportunities, the workload itself is really what's going to help you decide when you're ready to go to grad school. Employment opportunities, when you start taking all these things into consideration, that'll kind of help motivate you on your feeling towards, okay, now I want to go into grad school. And I mean, yeah, usually a year in advance is how long it takes for submitting the application itself. So you have to do it at least a year in advance. So here at UNT, we open our application up literally at the beginning of August, if not late July. We open it up at the beginning of August for the next fall semester. So it's already open a year in advance. I honestly tell students to, start gathering all that information usually the summer before, so that when that application opens up on Apply Texas, you'll be ready to submit everything, especially if they have hard deadlines. There's always something to keep in mind, is just the programs usually want you to submit your application at least 6 months to a year in advance before starting in the program.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing to keep in mind, it's not so much applicable to my scholars, but in terms of general graduate training of whatever kind, there is a phenomenon that is really not more than about 10 years old, of what we at UNT call grad track. Many universities have started doing this. It's a kind of accelerated graduate program that is just piggybacked onto your BA or your BS. if you stay an extra year at UNT, for example, under the aegis of whatever department that offers this program, you end up with a 1-year master's degree. That can't be a bad thing.
No.
So if whatever university you're at offers this kind of program, and you're not really sure what you want to do, but you might want to go to graduate school, you might want to consider something like this. It's a really good deal.
Saves you time, it saves money. Definitely time, because I mean, you go from 4 years of completing your bachelor's degree, and then usually if you graduate and let yourself then apply for a grad program, that separately, if you do them separately, that could be anywhere between usually about 6 years in total. You cut that down, you take a whole year off. That means you can get employed faster. That more job opportunities are out there for you because you already have a master's within 5 years. So yeah, so like definitely good to think about considering a fast track program.
So Sean, I think that you brought up something that a lot of students, especially first gen, since they may not have a foundation to navigate grad school, is how long in advance or how far in advance you need to prepare to enter your grad programs. Some universities will have graduate admission every semester, while others it's that one time. Excuse me. So definitely looking in advance, but it doesn't mean that you've lost your opportunity if you've missed the deadline. It just means that, okay, you have another year to prepare. And sometimes collecting all of this material or all of the requirements that they're going to ask of you might take that long.
Yeah, it does.
So it's okay, like if you miss a deadline, but just considering this might be a process that needs to be started way in advance.
Yeah.
So Dr. Caffrey and Sean, you both mentioned that you're first gen. Allyson, are you first gen as well?
So it depends on who you ask. My mother, I was raised by a single mother until I was 6. She had 1 year of community college. And then she married my dad. And he has a master's, 2 masters, 3 bachelors. So he broke the mold for me on that one. But so I got very lucky in that I did have his guidance. So in that facet, I don't consider myself a first generation student because I did have somebody I could ask questions to.
But through your bloodline, you first.
But through my bloodline, I'm first gen. And I am very passionate about first gen because I do recognize that I went to him all the time. And I had that, and I was lucky. I was really lucky to have that. And it really changed my high school career, my college career, because he was able to start from a very early age telling me these things to prepare for college. And I didn't realize until I got to college and interacted with other people who didn't have someone like my dad, what the difference that makes. Right. And so, and it's funny, I can see the difference even just like when I asked my mom a question about something related to college when I was trying to navigate it, it was like, just go ask your dad, And so I understand that, that for first generation students, that's what you hear, but not go ask your dad. Like, you're going to have to find somebody to help you figure that out, or just go.
What I got often was, you know how to go Google it. Like, you know how to find it. Like, I said, okay, thanks. That was my next step. If you didn't know the answer, that was a plan, Mom. Thank you. Skip to that step now.
Yes. One thing also most people don't think about, because they think about their experience thinking about graduate school or going to graduate school as a kind of individual effort, right? That might be a kind of cultural problem that Americans have in particular, is they think they're out there swinging in the wind, even though their entire existence is built on a social structure that is designed to help or hinder them in some ways. But here's something that I always recommended my students, because I've been helping first generation students since I was at the University of Chicago, and then American University, and then George Washington University, and then finally at Harvard University, and now here. And the best advice I can give them is 3 heads are always better than 1. You're not going to be the only first generation person there. Go and find them, make friends, hang out, work on things together. When you work on problems together, it's unlikely that some weird aspect of a problem is going to get by all 3 of you. Somebody's going to catch it. You're going to benefit from that collective effort. You also make friends. You also because you collectively, the 3, 4, 5 of you are collectively a source of knowledge, you're going to get other people coming to you for help. And there's simply nothing better, no better way to learn about something than to teach other people to do it, because it requires a collective process. And that I tell all of my scholars here at UNT the same thing. When they get there, find the other people who are in the same boat and work together. It might be anti-American, but it's simply the best way to do things.
Yeah. Well, and I think you bring up a great point too, that I think, grad school is almost like a leveling field in the sense that, while it's less common for your parents to have gone to grad school than it may have been a bachelor's. So you see, I feel like first-gen students see when they get to grad school, everybody else is kind of more in the same boat, right? And they have the same questions and they have the same struggles more so than they may have felt in undergrad. So it does, I think, seem easier sometimes to reach out and ask for help. And I feel like at the graduate level, you see more of those people like, okay, you're in my class, come on, like we're sticking together. And, like the cohort that you experienced, Sean, I think those naturally develop more often in grad school without there being a forced cohort, because you really are all on the same struggle. The understanding of what grad school looks like is just not out there for people as much as it may be for the undergrad experience. So I think that is one great benefit, is that it really does in a way level the playing field, and you have an ability to feel more comfortable being lost because everybody in grad school is a little lost, and that's okay. That's part of the process, is working through that. So
I feel like if you quietly being lost in grad school, you ain't grad schooling right. You got to be saying I'm lost out loud, because at some point that's the goal of the program, is to lose you. Like
that's well said. That's well said.
You have to verbally say that I'm lost. Like who else is lost with me?
And you hear that, right? Like when you're in grad classes, you'll hear people just verbally say like, I don't know what's going on. Can somebody help me?
Can we rewind
it's that collective sigh where you're like, oh, okay, I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
No, like we had our cohort, like we were, at first it started out real competitive. Like it was really like what you get on the test. Like we all in the group be together being our friends, but it's like, all right, what you get on the I did better. Yeah. But at the end of it all, it was really like it brought us closer. That friendly competition brought us closer, because we at the end of it all, we were authentic with each other. We were all present and dealing with the same issues because we had the same deadline to meet. So when you know that you're in the same boat and you're able to rely on this group of people and they give you, their 2 cents, it kind of helps you make sense as of what's happening and going on in your head. And that way you can craft it and put it on paper, whatever it is you need to do. So definitely helpful when you work as a unit.
Yeah, you would think that that people get smarter as they go higher, but that's not the case.
No.
Because it starts over if you get into a PhD program. UNT must be a nice place to get to go to grad school, because Chicago and Harvard, they ain't like that. It's not nice. The people aren't nice to each other. And once you get into a PhD program, they're even less nice to each other. They're even less likely to speak out loud and say, I don't know what's going on, somebody help. It's harder to make friends. You have to try harder. And all of a sudden, when you get into a PhD program in one of the top shelf universities, everything stays competitive. And you got to work hard to build those relationships where you can sort of let your guard down. But maybe UNT is just a better place. Because
it's still kind of mean. It's just the Southern hospitality side of things.
Yeah, it's mean green, Sean.
I don't know, because during orientation for the public administration program, we were told, like, our group, you cannot do this alone. Like, you cannot enter this graduate program thinking that you're going to be able to do this alone. You will have to rely on each other to get through it. And they were right. Like, we had to form bonds with each other in order to get through it. It was still tough. I think we've all mentioned that graduate school is a really tough experience. It's not easy, but there's 4, and yes, Allyson, I'm including you. There's 4 first gen students on screen, or first gen students, first gen people on screen today, and we all did it. Like, it is achievable. It's easier to achieve than you think, although it will include a lot of work. We represent that. So we're at time. Any final words from any of our panelists today?
Come see us.
Yes.
Just reach out. Any of us would love to talk to you and navigate you through this process.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly the case. If you have questions that I can answer, anybody is welcome to come talk to me. If I can't answer them, I'll send them to Sean or Allyson.
Deal. That's a deal.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Definitely feel free to reach out to me, for sure. Honestly, I guess one of the little notes that I want to leave on is something, especially as a first generation student, imposter syndrome is real. Feeling like you're not meant for that environment happens often. It still happens to me to this day. So I often have to tell myself, like, regardless of where you are physically or even mentally, virtually present, it doesn't matter the situation, own the room, because you're the only person in your skin, you're the only person who had your experience. So definitely don't be afraid to, step up and speak and give your 2 cents, because you may have an impact on somebody in any way. So
yeah, in my experience, I've told people that imposter syndrome is a real phenomenon, and it's complete BS as well. At the same time, everybody feels it, but you should ignore it and keep going, right?
yes.
And absolutely nobody ever listens to me. Nobody listens to me. They completely blow that off. Now, so the only advice I give now is it gets better. Do it for a couple of years, it gets better. By the time your couple of years are up, you won't feel so much of the imposter syndrome. It doesn't matter what I tell you, just realize that it gets better.
Awesome. So, well, thank you all so much for participating in this panel today. I will provide this online for students to access via the website. Yeah, it was great. I felt like I was a student inquiring about grad school all over again. So I really appreciate your time and sharing your expertise and your personal stories as well. So,
Thank you,
you so
Desiree, for
much.
having us.
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely.
And if you get that PhD itch, you know who to come talk to.
Stopping recording.